Rachel Harper stepped into the sterile hospital room, the scent of antiseptic clinging to the air. Her heart thudded violently as Dr. Patel turned with eyes too heavy for hope. He said, "Rachel, I'm sorry. There's nothing more we can do." The words struck her like a blade, stealing her breath. The walls seemed to close in, white and suffocating, as her knees threatened to buckle. A nurse's quiet shuffle echoed like thunder, and Rachel's trembling hands gripped the bedrail for anchor. Her chest burned, and silence roared inside her ears, louder than the machines around her. She whispered, "This can't be real," but reality crashed harder with each blink. The fragile thread holding her world snapped in that single moment, leaving nothing but devastation behind. Rachel stumbled from the room, her footsteps hollow on the polished floor. Her chest tightened as if each breath demanded a wall. She thought of calling Lily, but words felt impossible. The hallway stretched endlessly, lined with posters of hope that mocked her despair. A child's laughter echoed distantly, sharp and cruel in its timing. She pressed her back to the cold wall, whispering, "How do I go on from this?" The world spun, every detail too sharp, every sound too loud. She wanted to disappear into silence. Her tears blurred the sterile corridor, and for the first time, Rachel felt utterly unmoored, a stranger to her own skin. Memories crashed in uninvited, Rachel laughing under summer skies, her hand clasped in Noah's during better days. The echo of his voice carried warmth she could barely recall. But the vision dissolved, leaving only the sterile hospital walls. She gasped as though grief itself had stolen oxygen. The world once filled with color, now suffocated in shades of gray. She whispered Noah's name, fragile and broken. The ghost of joy stung like salt in an open wound, and Rachel felt her heart fracture further, realizing how far she had fallen from herself. Alone in the hospital's side room, Rachel collapsed into a chair. Her body shook uncontrollably, as though grief had seeped into her bones. She buried her face in trembling hands, muffling the sobs that broke free. Every sound in the building seemed amplified, each voice and machine cutting like a blade. "Please, just stop," she whispered into the hollow of her palms. Her reflection in the darkened window stared back with eyes she didn't recognize. It was not the woman she once was, but a hollowed version, stripped of her spirit. The silence after her sobs was heavier than the cries themselves. On a table near her chair sat a half-empty paper coffee cup, still warm, abandoned by another soul. Rachel reached for it absent-mindedly, her hand trembling before pulling back. The world felt filled with reminders of life moving forward, while hers was frozen. A nurse passed by with a clipboard, offering a glance of pity, but Rachel turned away. She whispered, "Don't look at me," her voice sharp with shame. In that moment, she realized grief made her invisible and exposed at once, caught in a cruel paradox that threatened to crush her spirit. Morning sunlight spilled weakly through blinds as Rachel sat at her kitchen table, head bowed over untouched toast. The silence pressed in like a second skin. She whispered, "I don't even know who I am anymore." Her eyes fell on an old photograph pinned to the fridge, her smiling with Noah before life grew heavy. The memory stung. She traced the photo with her finger, longing for the woman she had once been. Every corner of the small apartment reminded her of sacrifices, the endless hours of work, the fading colors of her own joy. "Keep moving, Rachel," she muttered. But her reflection in the blackened coffee surface told another story, one of exhaustion, fear, and the growing realization that she was slipping away. Later, Rachel sat on the worn couch with her young daughter, Lily. Lily's small hand curled around hers, grounding her in a way nothing else could. Lily said, "Mommy, are you okay?" Rachel forced a smile, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. "I'm fine, sweetheart," she lied, her chest heavy. Lily's laughter filled the room, yet it cracked against Rachel's brittle heart. The truth was unbearable. Rachel's world revolved around Lily, but the weight of keeping it all together was crushing. She hugged her tighter, whispering silently in her mind, "You're the reason I breathe, even when it hurts to exist." Rachel's phone buzzed with another overdue bill. Her hands trembled as she swiped the screen, numbers glaring like accusations. Her chest tightened with panic. She whispered, "How do I keep us afloat?" The apartment's silence pressed harder, punctuated by the hum of the fridge. Every choice felt like drowning: work more hours and lose time with Lily, or stay home and risk falling deeper into debt. The weight of every decision clawed at her. Her heart whispered, "You're failing her." Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them back, refusing to let Lily see. "You will find a way," she told herself, though her voice cracked under the lie. Rachel's best friend, Sarah, arrived that evening with groceries. She placed the bags down, her eyes scanning Rachel's weary face. Sarah said, "You can't keep doing this alone." Rachel forced a half smile, brushing her hair back. "I don't have a choice." Sarah's eyes softened, but worry lingered. She pulled Rachel into a hug, holding her longer than usual, as if her embrace could patch the cracks. Rachel's tears threatened to spill, but she bit them back, unwilling to unravel in front of her friend. Sarah whispered, "You're stronger than you know." But Rachel's silence screamed louder than any denial. That night, as Lily slept peacefully, Rachel sat at her bedside. She tucked the blanket gently, brushing her daughter's cheek with trembling fingers. "I'll protect you no matter what," she whispered, her voice breaking under the weight of the promise. The moonlight through the window bathed them in silver, casting shadows that stretched across the walls. Rachel's chest ached with exhaustion, but her gaze remained steady, locked on the one anchor holding her world together. She felt invisible scars deep inside her. But in that quiet moment, she made a vow to endure, to survive, to never let Lily see her brokenness. Rachel sat in her cramped office cubicle, staring at a mountain of unfinished reports. The fluorescent light buzzed above, a cruel reminder of the hours she had already given. Her phone vibrated with another message from her landlord demanding rent. Panic gnawed at her chest, each bill and deadline pressing in like a vice. Her boss leaned over the partition, voice sharp with impatience. "Rachel, you're falling behind again." She forced a nod, biting back tears, whispering, "I'll catch up." But inside she felt the cracks widen. She wasn't sure how much longer she could carry both the weight of survival and the weight of her grief. That evening, Rachel returned home to find her mother, Evelyn, waiting with folded arms. Evelyn's voice carried judgment sharper than knives. "You need to get yourself together. Lily deserves better than this mess." Rachel's chest constricted, her mother's words cutting deeper than any stranger's. "I'm doing everything I can," she pleaded, but Evelyn shook her head. The unspoken disappointment filled the room like smoke. Rachel's hands trembled as she reached for a chair, steadying herself. The pain of failing in her mother's eyes was unbearable, and it planted seeds of doubt that whispered she wasn't enough. Rachel's phone buzzed again. This time it was Noah, the man who had once promised forever, but vanished when life grew difficult. His name flashing on the screen was like salt on a wound. She hesitated, then answered. His voice carried false warmth. "I just wanted to check in." Rage and grief twisted together as she whispered, "You don't get to care now." Silence filled the line, heavy with unspoken history. When he finally muttered, "I still think about you," Rachel hung up, her chest burning. The betrayal still cut raw, and his return threatened to unravel what little strength she clung to. Alone later, Rachel stared at herself in the bathroom mirror. Her reflection seemed foreign, the dark circles under her eyes proof of battles she never chose. She whispered, "Who are you now?" Her inner voice screamed, echoing every doubt she had buried. Grief and exhaustion stared back in the hollow eyes of a stranger. Her hands gripped the sink, knuckles pale. The silence pressed against her skull until it roared. In that moment, the enemy wasn't just the world outside, it was the storm inside her, threatening to pull her into darkness she feared she'd never escape. By the time Lily woke from a nightmare, Rachel felt like she was unraveling. Lily clung to her, whispering, "Don't leave me." Rachel pulled her close, heartbreaking at the thought that her daughter sensed the chaos within her. "I'll never leave you," she said firmly, though her inside screamed with doubt. As Lily drifted back to sleep in her arms, Rachel realized how far she had drifted from herself. She was losing her identity in the storm of responsibility, grief, and fear. For the first time, she admitted silently, "I don't know how to hold on much longer." The apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Rachel sat curled on the floor, her back against the wall, knees drawn to her chest. Her breath came in short, broken gasps, as if grief had stolen air from her lungs. She whispered, "I can't keep fighting," though no one was there to hear. The weight of every failure, every harsh word, every unpaid bill pressed down until she shook uncontrollably. Tears stained her cheeks, her voice trembling with fragments of prayers she no longer believed would be answered. She buried her face in her arms, desperate for the world to disappear. The front door creaked open, and Sarah rushed in, finding Rachel on the floor. Dropping her bag, Sarah knelt beside her, pulling her into an embrace. "You don't have to do this alone," she whispered, her voice steady but eyes wet. Rachel tried to speak, but her throat tightened, words caught between sobs. She shook her head, muttering, "I'm too tired." Sarah's grip tightened, her presence fierce in the fragile moment. Rachel leaned against her, trembling, allowing herself to be held. For the first time, she let someone feel the rawness she had hidden, though shame burned deep in her chest. Later that night, Rachel sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly as Mark, her estranged partner, stopped by unannounced. His presence filled the room with old tension. He said, "You need help, Rachel. Let me step in." She clenched her jaw, whispering, "You weren't here when it mattered." His eyes flickered with guilt, but his voice sharpened. "I can't watch you fall apart anymore." Rachel's chest ached with conflicting emotions, anger, longing, and exhaustion colliding. She slammed her hand against the table. "Don't pretend you care now." The silence that followed was heavier than the argument itself, suffocating them both. Rachel retreated to the bathroom after Mark left, staring again into the mirror. The reflection mocked her, whispering doubts that clawed at her chest. Her inner voice thundered, "You're weak, unworthy, failing." She slammed her palms on the counter, whispering, "Stop it. Stop." Her breathing turned ragged as she fought invisible battles. The reflection seemed to shift, her own eyes filled with shadows she didn't recognize. Tears blurred the glass, her body trembling as she whispered, "I don't even know who I am." The silence afterward was sharp, pressing deeper than any voice. It was the war within she feared most. The next day, Rachel met Father Thomas, the mentor figure who had once guided her in younger years. They sat across from each other in the quiet of the church hall. He studied her face gently and said, "Pain doesn't erase who you are, it shows you what you carry." Rachel lowered her gaze, whispering, "I'm not strong enough anymore." His voice softened, steady like stone. "Strength isn't never breaking, it's choosing to rise again." Her chest ached as his words sank in. She didn't believe them yet, but for the first time in weeks, something faint flickered within her. Rachel sifted through a stack of hospital documents, her fingers trembling as she read the fine print. The words blurred, but one detail sharpened like a blade. Lily's condition had been worsened by negligence. Her breath caught, chest clenching as she whispered, "No, this can't be true." She slammed the papers onto the table, anger and despair colliding violently. For years she had blamed herself, believing she wasn't enough. But now the truth showed someone else's careless hands had deepened their suffering. The room tilted, rage building under her skin, her body trembling with the knowledge she could no longer ignore. Rachel stormed into the hospital, documents clutched in her fist. She confronted Dr. Patel in the hallway, her voice sharp and breaking. "You knew, didn't you?" His eyes widened, shame flickering, before settling into silence. The sterile corridor suddenly felt suffocating, the walls pressing closer as Rachel's chest heaved with rage. She shook the papers at him, shouting, "You let this happen?" For a moment, Dr. Patel's lips parted as if to explain, but the truth was already written across his face. Rachel's tears blurred her vision, anger erupting in the rawest form she had ever felt. Rachel's fury spilled into the hospital lobby as she sank into a chair trembling. Sarah rushed in, crouching beside her. "Rachel, talk to me," she pleaded. Rachel shoved the papers toward her, whispering, "They knew. They let her suffer." Sarah's face paled, her lips pressing tight as she pulled Rachel into her arms. Rachel sobbed against her shoulder, choking out, "I thought it was me. All this time, I thought I failed her." Sarah shook her head fiercely, whispering, "You didn't fail. They did." The truth landed like both relief and devastation, carving Rachel open in new ways. Alone in her bedroom later, Rachel spread the documents across the bed, her hands shaking as she traced the damning words. Her mind screamed with images of Lily's pain, replaying every sleepless night and unanswered question. She whispered, "All this time it wasn't me." The revelation clawed at her chest, equal parts fury and despair. Shadows stretched long across the walls as the lamp flickered, making the room feel haunted. For the first time, Rachel felt the depth of betrayal sink into her bones, a weight heavier than grief alone. She was drowning in a truth she could not unsee. The next morning, Rachel stood by Lily's bed, watching her daughter sleep peacefully, oblivious to the storm outside her dreams. Rachel brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, whispering, "They hurt you, and I let them. But not anymore." Her chest tightened, determination rising like fire where despair had lived. She pressed her forehead gently against Lily's, tears falling silently. In that fragile moment, Rachel vowed to fight, no matter the cost. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was war. The quiet resolve in her voice marked the turning point, the birth of a fire she had buried too long. Rachel stood in front of the hospital entrance, documents clutched tightly in her hands. The early morning air was sharp, each breath cutting through her chest like glass. She whispered, "It ends today." Her heart pounded violently, but beneath the fear, a new fire burned, fueled by every sleepless night, every unanswered question, every tear Lily had shed. The automatic doors slid open, spilling sterile light onto her trembling figure. For the first time, she wasn't stepping in as a victim, she was stepping in as a mother ready to fight. Her voice was low but steady. No more silence. Inside the boardroom, Rachel faced a panel of administrators. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger as she laid the documents on the table. "You let her suffer," she said, her eyes burning with fury. A man in a gray suit tried to interrupt, but she raised her voice over him. "I will not be silenced anymore." The room thickened with tension, the shuffle of papers and shifting chairs only amplifying her rage. Her hands shook, but her resolve did not. She looked each of them in the eye, daring them to deny the truth written in black and white. After the meeting, Rachel collapsed into a quiet hallway, back against the wall. Her body shook as if the confrontation had drained the last of her strength. Tears spilled freely, but this time they carried release rather than defeat. Sarah appeared at her side, kneeling down. "You were incredible," she whispered. Rachel shook her head, whispering, "I'm falling apart." Sarah gripped her hand tightly, eyes unwavering. "No, you're standing taller than ever." Rachel exhaled sharply, her chest aching, realizing the truth. Breaking apart was not weakness. It was the first step toward rising again. That evening, Mark arrived at Rachel's apartment, uninvited, his face tight with guilt. "I want to make this right," he said, voice unsteady. Rachel's anger flared, but beneath it lay exhaustion. "You left us when we needed you most," she said, voice sharp as glass. Mark's eyes lowered, shame flickering, yet he stepped closer. "I can't erase the past, but I want to stand with you now." Rachel's chest tightened, torn between fury and the faint longing for support. The silence stretched heavy until she whispered, "If you mean it, prove it." It was no forgiveness, only a challenge. Later that night, Rachel sat at Lily's bedside, her hand resting on her daughter's. The storm of the day lingered, but for the first time, she felt strength instead of defeat. She whispered, "I won't stop fighting for you." Lily stirred in her sleep, turning toward her touch, a faint smile curling her lips. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but they burned with purpose. Her heart thudded like a drum, steady and fierce. She kissed Lily's forehead, whispering again, "For you, always." In that fragile silence, Rachel felt the spark of a warrior, born out of love. The city was beginning to stir, the first hum of traffic blending with the faint call of morning birds. Rachel walked slowly down the sidewalk, her shoes clicking against wet pavement that still reflected fragments of the night's rain. Her breath was visible in the cool dawn air, each exhale heavy but steady. She whispered, "It's not over, but it's different now." For so long she had moved through life as though shackled, each step forced and hollow. But now there was something new, a faint thread of resolve pulling her forward. The sky above was still pale gray, yet slivers of gold pierced through, painting broken clouds with promise. She clutched her worn bag closer to her chest, not out of fear, but as if she were carrying a piece of herself that had been lost and finally found. The city was indifferent, alive with strangers rushing to their own destinations. Yet Rachel felt a quiet shift inside her, an understanding that survival was no longer about pretending to be unbroken. It was about walking, scarred and changed, but still moving forward. Back in her apartment, Rachel paused at the kitchen table where the stale piece of toast still sat on a chipped plate. For days it had been a silent symbol of her inability to move, of her grief's relentless grip. Today she pulled the chair out, sat down, and lifted it to her lips. The bite was small, dry and tasteless, yet it carried the weight of something monumental. She whispered, "One step at a time," her voice rough but clear. The sunlight pressed through the blinds, warmer than it had felt in months, striping the table in golden bars. Dust floated lazily in the beams, a reminder of the ordinary details she had forgotten to notice. She did not feel healed, not yet, but she felt the faintest spark of possibility. Every choice from this moment forward, no matter how small, would matter. The silence in the apartment was no longer suffocating. It was space waiting to be filled with new memories. Rachel straightened her shoulders, realizing that survival wasn't one sweeping act of courage. It was these small, deliberate decisions to keep living. Later that afternoon, Rachel sat once again across from Father Thomas in the church hall. The stained glass windows painted shifting colors across the floor, fragments of beauty against the plain wooden benches. Her voice was quiet, but steady. "I don't feel healed, but I feel awake." Father Thomas leaned forward, his lined face calm, his eyes filled with patient compassion. He replied softly, "Healing isn't about forgetting, Rachel. It's about remembering differently." She let the words sink into her chest, like water finding its cracks. The silence that followed was not empty. It carried weight, a pause filled with meaning. She realized her journey was never about erasing the pain or pretending it hadn't shaped her. It was about learning how to hold it without drowning. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe she wasn't lost forever. Maybe she had simply been wandering toward a version of herself she had yet to meet. Her breath shook, but it was steadying, and the light on her face made her feel, for a fleeting second, whole. That evening, Rachel sat with Mark in the dim light of the apartment's living room. The air between them carried unspoken history, heavy but no longer suffocating. Mark's voice was quiet, almost uncertain. "I want to try again, not for me, but for Lily." Rachel studied him carefully, the memory of abandonment still sharp, but softened by exhaustion and the flicker of sincerity in his eyes. Her voice was even, cautious. "This isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about building something new." Mark's gaze dropped, shame carving lines across his face. "I know," he whispered. The silence stretched, but this time it wasn't only painful. It was space, fragile and tentative, where something unformed might grow. Rachel didn't forgive him that night. Her wounds were too deep, but she allowed a possibility to exist, and that was enough. She leaned back, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She had learned that forgiveness wasn't surrender. It was a choice, and it could wait until her heart was ready. That night, Rachel sat at Lily's bedside, the soft silver of moonlight painting her daughter's face. Lily stirred, curling into the blanket, her breathing steady, innocent. Rachel brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, whispering, "I'd do it all again for you." The words trembled with both pain and devotion, carrying the truth of everything Rachel had endured. Tears welled and spilled, but they felt different tonight. They weren't just sorrow, they were release, the kind that came when the heart finally stopped fighting against itself. She leaned closer, pressing her forehead to Lily's, her lips forming a quiet promise. "I'll keep going. Always." The room was still, the only sound Lily's gentle breaths, yet it felt alive with unspoken vows. Rachel sat there long into the night, scarred, weary, and forever changed, but no longer lost. She had discovered the truth that would guide her forward. That love, even in brokenness, was enough to keep her alive.